The Go Radio Business Show with Trywire.com.
Tom, good morning.
Good morning, Willie. I'm broadcasting live from London today.
All right, so it's not sunny Caribbean.
It's not the sunny Caribbean. I'm in very grey and dreich looking London today.
Right, well, while we're on about grey and dreich, let's start off by talking about some of the things, some of the news that's come out this week about the economy, about the GDP, about inflation and all that kind of stuff. There's obviously bits of mixed messages, but the thing that the Chancellor has jumped on, which is good news, is there seems to be a slight rise in our GDP, right? Yeah. But inflation seems to be heading the wrong way, and certainly unemployment at 4.8% is heading the wrong way. So I think when you look at all the news, I don't think it's as rosy maybe as Rachel thinks.
I think the underlying economy, Willie, the people you and I speak to, the real businesses, as I call them,
yeah,
these are the folk who are in probably a smaller business. They're striving, they're working hard. They're a bit worried, Willie, and they're worried what's going to come in the budget. You know, the last budget was a 40 billion tax increase. Now, we can all understand probably why. I think the money we spent on the pandemic has been mainly ignored now, but it was 60, 70 billion it cost the UK taxpayer, to give out the furlough, to give out the loans to businesses. There was an awful lot of fraud as well. But I think businesses, when I speak to them, they're saying, Tom, what's going to come in the budget now? I don't know. You don't know. There's only probably a handful of people in Westminster that know. But people are fearing the worst. Therefore, in the businesses I speak to, they're battening down the hatches. They're not taking on that extra employee. They're maybe looking at cutting the hours of some other ones because of the NI increase that came in the last budget. So, there's these big government statements about policy, but you and I deal with the real businesses, folk on the ground every day trying their best. And there's a bit of a fear, Willie. I don't know if you feel that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on the budget, Tom, I actually think we get a wee sneak preview this week of maybe what is coming. In the Chancellor's interview with Sam Coates on Sky, she did say that there will be tax increases and there's potentially going to be cuts. So that gives us a wee idea about what's coming, and that will obviously not be good news, but it'll be interesting to see. And it's interesting, I think the presenter was trying to say that he think that maybe the Chancellor had been off script and he doesn't know whether her team would have wanted her to say this or not. To be fair, they were having the interview at the side of the M25 where there was a lot of noise. And I think that he said it was only when they get back to the studio and they listen to the tape that they realised they'd got a nugget. So it'll be interesting to see what Rachel does in the budget. But I think we've got a wee insight. But you're right. But I would just say to this, Tom, and we mentioned it last week, and I say this to every politician, I got proof this week that the number one thing that they should all be concentrating on is the cost of living crisis. Right? Yeah. It is far, far worse than they could ever imagine, and they need to get close to their constituents, and they need to be taking that back to Westminster. I'm taking it back to the House of Lords. What are we doing to help people at the moment with a cost of living crisis? Because I would say to you, it is the number one thing.
And, if you were running a political party that's coming up for an election, Willie, you would be sorting those things, because if you sort those things, voters will vote for you. It's quite simple in my view.
Yeah.
I do have a bit of sympathy with Rachel Reeves, though, because I was looking at, I'm a bit of an anorak for some of these figures. So I was looking at what wriggle room she's got in her budget. And the fact is, she doesn't have much, Willie. 40% of public spending is on the NHS, and politicians cannot touch that. Now, you and I would probably think that we could spend that money more efficiently, but it's a political hot potato. If you touch it in any way, and I actually think Wes Streeting is a very good politician there, then the opposition will claim, oh, you can't touch our NHS. But here's the big thing, Willie. The second biggest number that's going out the door after the NHS is the interest on our debt. And that's a non-productive number. Anybody knows in business that we all pay interest on the money we borrow. Well, Britain, the second biggest thing we spend on, more than defence, more than teaching, more than policing, more than all of those things added together, actually, is the interest we pay on our national debt. Now, let's bring it back to the simplistic thing of, if we were a business, we would either increase our turnover, in government terms, we would grow the economy, or we would cut our spending. Both of those things seem pretty hard to do. There isn't a silver bullet here, Willie, or other chancellors would have taken it. So I'm a bit stuck. I can understand, you and I understand how we can stimulate small and medium-sized businesses to grow, to pay their taxes and get the tax take up. But actually cutting public spending, Willie, is running at 150 billion a year more than it was before the pandemic. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And the sad thing is, and you're right, I've got all the sympathy in the world for the Chancellor. She inherited this. This has been bad management for the last 14 years before she took over. And I think that what the wriggle room she's got, as you say, is minimal. So she's going to have to be very, very clever. And if she does manage to come up with a recipe to turn things around here, she should get all the accolades in the world. But I think that at the moment that I'm a wee bit concerned about, not just about the UK economy, but I think there's a correction coming, Tom, and I think it's coming very soon. I think when we stop, hopefully when we've sorted what's happening in the Middle East, pray to God that we can sort out what's happening in Ukraine very soon. When we stop talking about wars and we start talking about economies, I think there's a huge correction coming. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. Some of the warning signals coming from some of the biggest institutions in the world, Jamie Dimon at Barclays, and even from Andrew Bailey at the Bank of England, and a lot of people are talking about the AI bubble going to burst, which will have a knock-on effect everywhere. I think there's valuations of companies, there's all sorts of stuff here. I think in the next 18 months, there's going to be a correction on valuations across the world.
Yeah, well, I was, again, reading recently that one stock in America, NVIDIA, which makes the chips for the computer chips for the AI revolution, has got a bigger market cap, Willie, than all of the companies on the London Stock Exchange. So one company. So I think things have gone a bit far in terms of valuation. I agree with you. And sometimes these corrections, somebody in Scotland trying their best in their business, does it affect them? Probably affects them in terms of interest rates. These corrections tend to send a shiver around the world. And so maybe interest rates are not going to fall as quickly as we all hoped. Maybe interest rates will go up. I'm not clever enough to work that out, I'm afraid. But yeah, I think this general uneasiness, Willie, about the budget, about the economy, things in the world just seem a wee bit uneasy to me and you just now. So I don't know what to do about it. There's absolutely nothing I can do. But I think we just got to be aware of it.
Yeah, and to end this kind of segment, our message to all politicians is get closer and closer to understanding what the cost of living crisis is and what we can do about that.
Yeah. So getting on to the cost of living crisis, Willie, one of the biggest things is energy costs. And you know a lot more about this than me. Now, Kate Forbes, who both you and I admire with her time in government, we both feel that she got business. There was a big repair job to do coming out from our previous First Minister, who didn't really get business and just ignored us. But unfortunately, Kate's going to hang up her MSP role. But fully understand she wants to spend time with her family first. You and I would totally understand that. But there's been an SNP conference last weekend, and I think she's playing a wee bit of politics. And goodness, why not? She's a politician. Why not be surprised? But she's calling on Westminster to take away the windfall tax, as it's called, on oil companies in the North Sea. Now, at a time when we've got an energy crisis, believe it or not, companies in the North Sea who are trying their best to get the oil out the ground are facing a tax rate of about 78%. So we are, no wonder our energy prices are expensive, but the SNP have their part to play because they give out the licenses in the North Sea, and they've been slowing that down. So I'm afraid the SNP government's hands are not clean on this one either. But what we've basically done, Willie, we have made Norway, a country that a lot of politicians hold up as this bastion that they've taken their oil revenues and got a sovereign wealth fund. But we have made Norway more wealthy because we are cutting down our North Sea oil production. And Norway have managed to keep their hydrocarbons coming out of their waters and do renewables at the same time. We don't seem to have did that, Willie, and I think it's a national disgrace.
Well, what's interesting, and I agree, Kate is right to talk about the windfall tax and to take that away. But it's interesting that for many, many years, the SNP would put Norway up. Alex Salmond certainly put Norway up as the blueprint for what could have happened in Scotland, right? Because of the fund, the Norwegian Wealth Fund all came from their oil money, right? And it's one of the largest funds in the world, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people in Norway would argue that they've certainly not had the benefit of it, right, with their cost of living, right? They would argue they're doing a wee bit better now in the last few years, but again, under pressure from the people. But I think it's right, and I think where I think where the SNP need to be more open in their thinking, because their stance against nuclear will go against us, right? It's going to be part of the solution going forward, right? But we would love to get to 100% renewables tomorrow, but it isn't going to happen overnight. We keep mentioning all the good things about renewables, but we are realistic in the fact that you need a mix. And the point that you're making is that we want to close our oil rigs down in the North Sea, right? We're losing loads of skills, loads of jobs. But when we do that, we're going to buy all our oil from somebody who's drilling 10 miles up the roads, right, and making them richer. So that doesn't make sense. But I think that you're right. I think the whole transition thing has to be looked at. We've said it before. Stop putting targets, right? Stop putting targets on people. Then when you miss them, the climate, everybody would love to get to net zero ASAP. But we need to have a realistic timeline about how we're going to get there.
And someone who really knows about this is Sir Ian Wood, friend of yours and mine, and he's just added another 40 million from his charitable foundation to go into this just transition in the North East, Willie. And that's Ian put in over £100 million of his own money to try and get this. And I would say governments need to listen to someone who's willing to put their own money in and who actually built an oil and gas business from nothing and made it into a global success story. It's not doing so well since Ian left, but sit with Ian, understand his point of view. He's put 100 million of his own money up there. Goodness me, he's worth listening to.
Yeah, but on that, if you know, putting this together, the Chinese firm Ming Yang have just announced that they've chosen Scotland to host their new wind turbine factory, right? And it's going to be one of the largest in the UK. So this is great. It's a great step in the right direction for renewables. They've got several sites that have been identified. Ardeshir, obviously, we've spoke about in previous as a preferred spot. The initial investment will be 750 million, but it could rise potentially to 1.5. And this will create 1,500 new jobs, which will be brilliant in that part of the country. And it's a big, big win for renewables. But there's the question, right? Back to your question, where are they going to live?
Well, we need
Where's
to build
the
some
houses?
houses, Willie, for them.
Right.
I'm afraid politics have intervened in this as well. So the headline is a brilliant headline, potentially 1,500 jobs at Ardessia, near Inverness. That is a brilliant headline. This Chinese company could have went to many places in Europe. They've chosen Scotland, but, and I'm sorry to say there is a but, politics has intervened at a time, and even President Trump has put his nose into this, saying, oh, don't know about the Chinese, don't know about national security. Do we want to give our infrastructure over to Chinese companies? I mean, this is above my pay grade, but it has slowed down the process of giving this the green light. I just hope we can find a way of getting through the geopolitics of this, and these 1,500 jobs do come to Ardessia.
Yeah, you're right. So, a wee icebreaker. What about the fact that because of Storm Abby, that the Oktoberfest beer festival was cancelled in Edinburgh, and we had to put 7,000 litres of beer. Right, now everybody watched this and they'll all be greeting in their beer to think that 7,000 litres of beer had to go down a stank.
Oh my God. I missed that story, Willie.
Right.
So
And
this is
I think
Storm Amy. Was it
they
quite
didn't
bad
get
in Scotland?
insurance. They weren't insured.
Well, they weren't insured.
No,
so when Storm Amy hit, was it quite bad in Scotland?
Yeah, loads of events were all cancelled, Tom. You know, you wouldn't have seen that. It was quite a way away from the beaches of Barbados or wherever you might have been. But yeah, but I think the thing is that it was going to be in Prince's Gardens, and the organisers had to call it off at the last minute. But they had to put 7,000. I mean, they came around the street and gave it away. You know what I mean?
Aye.
This will be breaking people. We don't need more drunks hanging about the streets of Edinburgh, right? But yeah, I thought that was interesting. It was called the Oktoberfest. I think that's what they call the big one in Germany as well, isn't it? Right, okay. So that's a shame. That's a real shame.
There's not much good news in this show today, Willie.
No, that'd have been a bit of a party time, 7,000 litres of beer. I hope it was the Golden Nectar. I hope it was the Tenants. Wee plug for Tenants there. What about Lloyds have announced this week that this whole car finance scandal could cost them up to $2 billion, where the car makers are going to go on trial over this Dieselgate emissions scandal. And this is not long after the PPI scandal. It's interesting, but obviously after the finance mis-selling has been through the courts now for years and years, and that could have been a major blow for car retailers, but it looks like this has fallen on quite quickly thereafter, and it does look as if there's something in it.
I've got a different point of view in this one, Willie. I've been trying to find out who has actually been wronged in all this.
Yeah.
And so was the customer misled? Did the customer pay more for their finance because of this? And the people I speak to, and let's be honest, these are the people who are selling the cars that I've been speaking to, said, look, this is a bit of a misnomer. The customer didn't actually pay more for their finance. It's just clever lawyers jumping on the bandwagon once again. Now, Lloyds put £2 billion aside to try and pay for this, Willie. £2 billion. That is unbelievable. So the people I've spoke to said the outcome of this will be that car finance prices may go up to cover all this.
Yeah. I think, Tom, what happened with this one is, unlike the finance deal, that people were sold cars and they bought cars on the belief that the emissions and everything it was doing with diesel were what the company said, and I think they're now being taken to task on that. I know one of the big manufacturers a couple of years ago got heavily sanctioned because actually the data that they were given had been, let's just say, put together by a wee guy in the back. So, and they were quite rightly, and it had a huge impact on their value and what the company was doing. So I think on this one, it's about, the people believe as if they were missold, and that's why Lloyds have put so much money. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But here's an interesting one. Did you see that the Dutch government have just swooped in and took control of a Chinese-owned chip manufacturer in the Netherlands? They stated it was required to safeguard European supply of semiconductors and protect Europe's economic security. Is this a dangerous escalation with China? There'll be more nationalisation of assets owned by countries out with the EU.
Well, we talked about it up at Ardesir, politics getting in the way. And listen, I understand we don't want to give up perhaps major infrastructure. People are worried about the Chinese, etc. But this is above my pay scale. I don't know how we actually fix this.
Yeah, but I think the bigger concern about this is they're doing this everywhere. Right, not just in Holland. Right, there's all sorts of stuff going on in the UK. There's stuff going on worldwide. They're doing it in Africa. What the Chinese have been doing is trying to implant themselves in countries like, that they go to buy copper out of a small region in Africa, and instead of giving them more and more, what they say is, no, we'll come and help you build an infrastructure. Right? I mean, there's wee villages in Africa get a 60,000-seater football stadium, right? Because it took them, they had to send 12,000 people from China to build it, right? And guess what? They didn't leave to go back.
Right.
And this is happening all over the world. Right? I mean, it's a joke that they're getting away with it. But when it comes to all the devices, everything, there's no doubt now that all these devices, that everybody's listening to you. Right? There's absolutely no doubt about that. If we want to start having a wee conversation just now about our two wee dogs, we'll start to get adverts on my phone for dog food. Right? So there's no doubt that people can't kid on anymore. And one of the things for me that really opened my eyes, remember a number of years ago, when they were on about safeguarding, when you had to go through airports and you had to make sure that your phone was off and all of this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Remember there was a situation where a guy's phone went and fire on a plane, right?
Uh-huh.
And they showed you the next day that we were all worried about, how come when my phone is 3 years old, the battery doesn't hold its charge anymore? And people were saying, oh, these manufacturers can actually have the battery last longer, but it's up to them. What they do is they make it go and then you need to buy a new phone. And say, oh, that's nonsense, that's rubbish. The day after that fire, I'm not going to mention the manufacturer, right? But the manufacturer sorted everybody's phone in the world and they cut their battery charge by 40%. The next day, so they couldn't dispute anymore that they were in control of what your charge might look like in the phone, right? And there's no doubt, I used to see it with my own phone, or, I'm going to be getting a new phone shortly because it's not keeping the charge, it's not holding the charge. Why did they just not sell us new wee batteries that went in for, a couple of $100 or whatever it might be? So I think on this one, I think that we need to really be careful about what we're buying off of the Chinese, because I think it might be a whole lot of trouble.
Well,
I think the next time I go to China, I might have problems at the passport control. Right? Just on that and on the Chinese, you will love this. Right? I've had to read this 10 times to make sure I was reading it right.
I know.
Right? The Chinese shopping giant Temu, right, has filled its accounts for its European operations in Ireland and showed $120 million profit, right, on a sale of 1.7 billion. Right, well, that's quite good. No, just less than 10%, whatever. That's no bad. But where it gets really interesting is, right, it surely must be the most profitable small business in the EU. And the reason why it's called a small business, it employs 8 people. 8 people. So what that means is £15 million a head net profit for each person that works for you.
Wow.
That is going to be the best ratio for a return in any company in the world.
I wish my retail business had those stats, right, Willie, I'll tell you.
So that's the sort of company that I'd love to have. I would love to have that.
But this company, Willie, I got to know about it a couple of years ago. So a pal of mine's a big fisherman, and he buys these fishing hooks and reels and stuff. And he spends a great deal of money on them. I couldn't believe the amount of money he spent on them. And he said, Tom, have you heard of this business called Temu? And I said, no at the time. And he said, well, look, I can get the same fly fishing hooks on Temu for a tenth of the price, and they're just as good. So that's somebody who's got plenty of money, but he's using Temu for such a archaic thing as flies for fishing. And then when I had a look at it, it blew my mind. It's basically just China putting their manufacturing expertise and just selling it to the world through its e-commerce site. It does employ more than 8 people, that's for sure.
Tom, I want to finish this with some wonderful news. Wonderful news. And we mentioned this a couple of years ago when we were raging. The United Airlines flights for Glasgow to New York are coming back for next year.
Wow. Well, that's a big... Because that's what I used to use. Well, I got to go through London now, which is a pain. So I think that's good. Well done to the people at Glasgow Airport, bringing it back in. And I just hope they'll let you and me into America these days. I think it's a bit harder. Well,
I think we'll get back in. We'll just need to change our passports, right? But I think that for why we talking about this on the business show, this is great for business. This is great for business, right? The number one thing in business is about connectivity. And now people in New York who want to invest in Scotland, with all the stuff that's going on with renewables now, it's much, much easier to get to the west of Scotland. I mean, the flights, I couldn't believe it, Tom, 2019 they stopped, right?
Is that right?
I used to get this flight once a month. Right, yep. Once a month. So when I heard that I had to go through to Edinburgh to get there, but well done, and I'm going to write a wee note to the chief exec of Glasgow Airport and the company to say, well, and if the council had anything to do with that because of subsidies, then well done to everybody that's got direct flights to the US back to Glasgow.
Well, thank goodness we're leaving this segment on a positive note, Willie, because it's been a wee bit doom and gloom.
Brilliant.
The Go Radio Business Show with TryWire.com.
Tom, we've got a great guest in the show this week, John McIlvogue, who's the MD of Morton Rolls and many other things I might add. Brilliant to have you on the show, John. Welcome.
Great to be here, guys, and thank you for inviting me on.
Morning, John.
Good morning, Tom.
Have you got any rolls and square sausage there for me?
Not today, but we'll come to that.
Right,
we'll come to the square sausage bit.
I keep telling you every week, the producer, to get somebody on here that owns a diamond mine, right, so we can get freebies off of them or whatever. John, tell us a wee bit about your background, where it all started, where you were born, brought up, and then obviously tell us about your... I know you've got plenty to tell us about business.
So I was born in Greenock, grew up in a council estate in Greenock with my grandfather and my father and all her wains at the time, it was a busy 3-bedroom semi-detached council house with 5 or 6 boys living in it. Went to school down there, studied local school, and then left school to study stained glass of all things, and never quite made it to the end of that, and decided that I needed money and not education in stained glass. So I went and set up a stained glass company, which was my first kind of foray into business, probably, and realised very, very quickly that probably there's not enough people want stained glass windows to actually make a reasonable living from it. But that certainly got me into the kind of working for myself and the entrepreneurial journey. So left the stained glass company and ended up, my father was a painter and decorator, and I was speaking to somebody. So I actually speak to somebody in a pub, and they said, do you know any painter and decorators? And I said, a couple. That took me on a journey to be supplying about 25 to 30 painter and decorators to new build housing developers, and that was way back. And very naive. My first absolute disaster, having all these guys working for you who got paid on a Friday, And you're dealing with these new build developers who were all sharks and not paying you in time, and it was just horrendous. And that was the first time where it was just, this isn't for me, this is bad. I can't afford to do this. So from there, I ended up, knew another guy. He was involved in carpets and flooring, and had been, and he was like, "Look, why don't we set up this kind of wee carpet shop and carpet company? I've got some customers." And I said, "Okay." So it kind of took me down that road. We went to open a wee shop in Shawlands in Kilmarnock Road, and on the day we were opening it, he said, "This isn't for me." He says, "You're what? You're what to take on the world. I'm going to retire." He said, "So, do you think you're the next carpet, right?" He says, "But look, I'll help you." And we ended up from there. That kind of, I went solo on that, and then we ended up, that kind of evolved into a kind of commercial flooring company. So I was doing lots of commercial flooring for like South Lanarkshire, North Lanarkshire Council and stuff. So I ended up a kind of reasonable business. From there on, it was an old company in Glasgow called Stevens and Graham, which had been going since 1947. Kind of high-end kind of carpet company they'd done a bit of everything, but the guy sadly passed away, and the family were kind of left. The family were living all over the world, didn't really know what to do with it, and I had a kind of connection that knew them, and I ended up going in and spent everything I had to buy this company from the family, and it was like come back in time. There was just stuff everywhere, and down in a factory in Palmadie, and I remember the first day spending literally everything I had. I had nothing left. Thinking, how am I going to pay these people on Friday? And it was one of them. And I thought, well, we've got stock. Well, let's try and sell it. And it was even. I remember the first day sitting, and a wee woman walked past. There was a kind of glass door on the office, and I seen a wee woman walking past. I said, "Who's that?" And somebody says, "That's Margaret, the bookkeeper." And I'm like, "Who's Margaret?" And she says, "She works upstairs." I says, "Have we got an upstairs?" And I was like, and I'm looking, I'm thinking, I don't remember seeing this woman's name, but she had retired and was working a couple of days to finish up and was going. So Stevens and Graham, an interesting business. But the key to Stevens and Graham was they had the world's biggest collection of tartan carpets. And I thought, the money's there. It's not all of this stuff. So we scaled it right back, and the problems and an old school business. Again, first week, got a chap at my door. McIlvogue, I want to talk to you. He goes, "Oh, guys, I'm just a young guy." And he says, "My wages are wrong." I says, "What do you mean your wages are wrong?" He says, I says, no, they're definitely right. My dinner money's not on there." I says, "Dinner money?" I says, "You're kidding." And he says, No, look. He comes in with all these old wage slips there. Dinner money. They were all getting paid money for their lunch. And I thought, we're doomed.
What size was it when you took over?
Oh, it was far too big. There was there was about 16 people working there at the time, and I had operated businesses before with contractors but actual employee staff. It was like a couple, and suddenly I'm dealing with these 16 people who absolutely despised me. I know.
For cutting the dinner money.
For cutting the dinner money. And I thought, right, this is it. At that point, I thought, this isn't going to work long term. But, we scaled it back, we restructured it, and we scaled it back just to tartan carpets and tartan rugs and bespoke carpets. And I mean, the customers at that wee company, which we're now since moved to Rutherglen. But the customers we've got are, it's people come in and they're like, oh, this is nice. But we do things like Buckingham Palace and Balmoral. We've done The Crown on Netflix. We've done, Trainspotting 2. We've just carpeted the luggage brand Goyard. You know that.
Yeah,
Well, you can afford it.
Yeah. Get a bit of name dropping.
Goyard. We've just done their Paris and London showroom. So we do high-end stuff, and we've now got 2 staff.
Right.
And it's and it works well, I suppose, in that. But one of the things the kind of journey that took me on was I was in New York on a Scottish Enterprise trade mission, and as part of the trade mission, there was a treat from Scottish Enterprise that they said, right, we're going to go to, on the Sunday night, we're going to go to Whisky Alive in New York. And I said, I hate whiskey. I was like, I really don't like whiskey. And there was a young guy called Blair Bowman, and I forget him. Really young guy. He was the founder of World Whisky Day, but really smart. I kind of really took to this young guy. Really smart guy. And he says, I really don't. I don't like whiskey. I drink vodka. I'm from Greenock. I probably drink land liquor or something. But I said, no, I drink vodka, I drink lager. I don't like whiskey. He said, I'll find you one you like. So that was fine. I had a few whiskies and stuff. So the next day we're walking down. I remember it like it was yesterday. We're walking down 6th Avenue. And he's telling me about whiskey, and he's talking about whiskey, and I says, yeah. And he's talking about the values in whiskey and what some of this stuff's selling for. I said, well, yeah. And he said, yeah, I mean, I know this guy who bought this bottle of whiskey for, for £400, and he sold it for £1,200. That's good, right? But because of Stevens and Graham, I was the carpet company. I was travelling all over Scotland, and I was in big country estates and hotels. So what I'd done after that day was I would stop at a distillery, and in every distillery in Scotland, you'll buy something that you can only buy in that distillery. So I would buy bits and pieces and I'd stick it in a cupboard. But we had recently done the Trump Aberdeen, the carpets in there, and I was driving past it, and I had been in it when it was just at the building stage, so I hadn't seen the finished job. And I thought, I'll go in and take some pictures for the website and stuff. And so Donald Trump had bottled a single cask of Glendronach, and I think it was 450 bottles. He signed 250 of them, and 200 were unsigned. So you paid 450 quid for the signed ones and 250 quid for the unsigned ones. So he was selling his signature. And so I bought one of the signed ones. So, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months later, I can't remember the exact time, we had a job to go and look at for McTeer's Auctioneers. They wanted a carpet designed for their auction house down in by Ibrox. And they had a whiskey sale on the following week. And I'm seeing all these things in the cabinet. And I says to the guy, I've got one of them, and I've got one of them. And so I'm going to put some of my whiskey, because I'd probably amassed about 50 bottles at this point. And I'm going to put some of these in here, see how they do. Really just to buy, I thought, I'll just buy more whiskey with the money. If I make some money on it, great. And the day of the auction, so the Donald Trump signed one was in it. The day of the auction was the day of his inauguration. Yeah. So BBC, STV all turns up with cameras to watch this auction, and it sold for £8,500. And I thought, might be something in this, you know. And so we kind of carried on with we carried on for that. But the light bulb moment for me was from the day I put it in to the day I get paid was probably, I don't know, 10, 12 weeks. And I thought, if anybody wants to sell something and appreciate an asset, I thought, well, they probably want the money today. So I set up a business called Whisky Buyers, which in effect is we buy any car for whisky, and people would sell their whisky collections to us. And again, we ended up with all this whisky, and then we set up Old and Rare Whisky. So we started on day one with Old and Rare Whisky. The stock value was, I don't know, £38,000 or something like that. And today it's, multiple millions, and that's still going, and with the same business model. And that, I suppose, then it's a kind of journey from, painter and decorator to carpets to whisky. And there was a wee cafe around the corner from Stevens and Graham, and it was always busy. It wasn't that great, and I thought, imagine if that was good, how many people would go to it. So I ended up with talking to the guy. He was looking to sell, so I bought this cafe off him. And I knew the GM of Morton's Rolls, and he says, well, we're looking for Morton's Rolls. Could you? He said, well, do you want to come up? We'll give you a tour. And I said, okay. And I walked around Morton's Rolls in Drumchapel, and I remember that, the wee pink and yellow tarts that you get, the pineapple tarts, yes. Right? And they're in the wee silver tin foil thing. Yeah. And I watched these four guys taking a big pile of these tin foil things and putting them in holes. And I thought, must be an easier way to do it than that, Yeah. And so I had a chat, and it was quite clear that Morton's Rolls were not doing that well at that point. Kind of had an initial chat, and they said, look, in my mind, I'm thinking, if we can kind of get a bit of investment in here, and we can kind of automate some of these processes, I think there's a decent business here. And I thought, at that point, I thought, I'm sure there'll be government help for this. And I thought, and I had a few contacts within government. So I went, spoke to the owners, and they said, well, why don't you get involved? And I said, all right, okay. But at that point, the damage had already been done. And 2 weeks later, the administrators arrived and closed it. So I'd done a deal at that point to buy the equipment from the administrators, but it was very clear to me, even having only been in it for a week, that it was leaking money everywhere. So it was, and I ended up, buying the plant machinery from the administrators, restarting it, and we had restarted it with. On the first day we restarted it, we had about 40 people. So it was 258 staff at that point, who sadly lost their jobs. We restarted it with about 40 people there. And I said, right, we need to cut. There was about 86 products. I said, look, we're famous for the crispy roll and the rolls, the potato scones. Let's forget all that stuff. Let's concentrate on what people want, which is these rolls, and really we've built it from there.
Can I just come in? Can I say to you, in your story so far, it sounds like you walk into a business, you like it, and you buy it. Do you want to come to City next week for your lunch? Like to pop in for lunch next week?
I need to ask Tom for a loan.
I don't think so, the way you're going.
So that was Morton's Rolls, and it's been challenging, extremely challenging over the last 2.5, 3 years. You had an ageing factory which really had no investment. So it's about overcoming that challenge. Any money you're making, it's straight back in to keep the machines going, to refurbish the machines, because replacing the machines is a non-starter. I mean,
capital intense.
I mean, the to get a roll plant is going to be £2 million. Yeah. We've got two. We've got two of them. So it's about making the best of what we've got, and also making sure that we're actually making money on what we sell, which is the key. And that.
So John, can I interrupt you a wee minute? So as Willie said, you're a great storyteller. So, but I think the viewers and the listeners need to get under your skin, because you go from a council house in Greenock, you're walking into every business and you're buying it. What happened? Where did you get these skills, John?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, as I kind of alluded to at the start of the thing, I was brought up by my grandfather, my father. My mother left us when I was 2 years old in Greenock. Maybe it's maybe this thing that's like, you need to succeed to prove everybody wrong. I don't know. I mean, I'm certainly from a family point of view, the only person in my entire family, and it's, if they're called McIlvogue, they're in my family, because we're the only people in the UK that's named that. So I'm certainly the only person in my family that's ever been involved in business of any sort.
Right.
So,
okay.
So I don't know. I mean, it's...
But here's a big question they'll all be asking, right? So you can understand that you've had a wee go at the stainless glass, didn't work, you went this way, right? How do you go from having whiskey business, how did you fund buying Morton rolls?
How did I fund buying Morton rolls? So I've got some wealthy friends.
Right.
So
that helps.
That does help, yeah. And but again, we bought the plant and machinery.
Can we have their names, John, please? Because Willie and I are looking for a loan.
Private investors, silent investors.
So we bought the plant and machinery, but the reality was that I never had the money at that point to operate that. I never had the money to operate Morton's rolls for any longer than about a fortnight. And that was the reality.
Yeah.
So I'm like, but it's a weekly paid thing. So you sell them, you get the money that week, and then you can pay the wages. And at that point, I made the decision within the first week that I said, we will supply local businesses. This is a local product, supplying, it's almost an artisan bakery for the masses, because there's a lot of handmade element. Well, the crispy roll was handmade from start to finish. So it's about, for us, it was about, right, forget about the multiples, because the multiples will absolutely hammer you on margin, hammer you on credit terms, hammer you every way. And I thought, and maybe I was naive. I probably was naive, because I had never been in that industry before. So I thought to myself, well, okay, so if it costs us, just for a number, if it costs us 20 pence to make something, we can't sell it for 22 pence. That doesn't really work for me. We need margin. And that daily delivery, we were getting margin on. So that allowed us to continue and grow it. And I mean, there was a lot of trust at the start of it as well with, you're asking customers to come back to you after after they've been let down. But we've managed to get about 2,500 customers back.
Wow.
So we can now get 2,500 customers.
So obviously, interesting journey, amazing. I think you're the only guest we've ever had on here who's been honest enough to say, I didn't know what was going to happen after week 2. I went in and took over this business and I've done this. But what you've done is you've made it work. You've made them all work. So the big question, we've got 2 minutes left. What's next?
Well, we've just taken on the UK license to produce Shelby Mustang muscle cars, which are a wee bit out there. So we got that.
They were going to have you on that, but a whole new show.
First right-hand drive Shelby Mustangs in the UK.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Launch parties on the 20th of November in Kirkliston Estate.
Right.
And I've also just at a very early stage business with a plant food. Plant-based company manufacturing a Indonesian product called Tempe, which is like a fermented soybean product.
Yeah.
A lot of, I think the food industry is changing. I think people are especially vegan, vegetarian, are moving away from this ultra-processed food. So this seems to kind of fit in. So, but it's very early stage, and the trials of that will be done in the next coming weeks.
So Mustang sports cars and soybeans. So
Yes.
there's not a correlation between that. But for the viewers and the listeners, we should let them know that the Shelby cars back in the day, what they're selling for today, millions.
Oh, you could be, Shelby Mustang GT350 is like 130.
No, I'm talking about the classic
Oh,
ones.
the classics,
built by
yes.
him
Oh,
back
of
in the
course.
day.
Oh, that's right.
10
Carol
million.
Shelby.
10
Oh,
million.
at least,
10 million.
at least.
Aye.
Yeah, at least.
So
it's
and
no,
where are you going to, if you allow me to tell us, where would you like to manufacture them?
so that they're all manufactured in Edinburgh.
Right?
Yeah,
Brilliant.
just in Kirkliston Estate.
What, Glasgow don't have any places?
No. Yeah. It's so... It's such a niche thing to put these together that there's only a couple of people that can do it, and I'm praying that this wee guy lives longer than...
So John, just as we finish here, looking back at all that you've done, have you any one tip for our viewers and listeners this morning? They're maybe sitting in their business going, goodness, it's a bit tough. What am I going to do? You don't seem to... You seem to sail through these things. You had 1 week's cash flow in the rolls business. I mean, that would send me to an early grave. But
Look,
so any tips?
What's the worst that can happen? You go skint and do it again. That's it. Just get back up.
Attitude, John.
Just get back up and do it again. There's the great thing about Scotland is there is thousands of opportunities out there. Thousands. Just grasp them. And the more certainly more opportunities come my way because of the network of people I know now, which is and that's the key. And I think from a very I built the first carpet company on networking. You just get yourself out there, get yourself to all these business meetings that are there. They're every night of the week. Just go and do it.
Brilliant.
Wow.
John, what a story. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Magic. And we'll definitely get you on. We want to see the first Shelby when it's ready.
Brilliant story, John. I think the viewers and the listeners will have loved your story. And we didn't even talk about football, which is great.
That's a whole story.
But that's a whole different story.
Yes,
But good luck to you, John. And keep in touch with the show and let us know how you're getting on.
Thanks, Tom.
Tom, not a brilliant show. It's been, obviously the listeners and the viewers have been supporting us. There's more and more people watching it in the various channels. So we can't wait to be back in front of you again next week. So thank you for watching or listening.